who's gone through a number of different forms of writing since I left school at your age. And I went to the Middle East as I was educated in Britain mostly, but I soon realized I was not cut out for proper employment. I failed 17 job interviews when leaving university, and the one job I was offered I refused because I didn't want to build hospitals in Saudi Arabia. And so I had to look around, what can I do, what do I want to do, and I thought, well, I like to write, and then if you're going to write and you want to get paid for it, you have to write about something that people need to know about or want to know about. And so I thought, well, the Middle East would be good. I studied Persian and Arabic, so I thought, right, there's my competitive advantage. I can go to Iran or the Arab world and work there and send news back, write about those places, and make my living. I got a job in Iran actually, but it was very revolutionary Iran in those days, and I thought that in order to look properly revolutionary, when I went to get my Iranian visa, I went to the Iranian embassy wearing battle fatigues in London. They hardly let me through the door. In fact, he interviewed me under the staircase in the entranceway, and then he kicked me out. So I didn't get my Iranian visa, so I spent about 5 years in the Arab world, writing about things there. A lot in Syria, funny enough. And it's funny to think that in Syria, my first experience, more or less, was in a big Syrian city being attacked by the Syrian army. Right now in Homs, Idlib, we read a lot about, oh, the bad Syrians, they're attacking their own cities. Well, 30 years ago, the first thing I knew about Syria was that the Syrian army attacks its own cities. It's funny, leopards don't change their spots much, I don't think. The Ba'athist regime in Syria has got a lot of form. Anyway, so I spent 5 years actually I got to Iran in the end, writing for various news agencies, which was hard work. I found it very difficult to write. It's more difficult than it looks to write very short 2-3 paragraph stories about people meeting each other in a different country. We used to call them Sheikh Ahmed stories. Sheikh Ahmed met Sheikh Mahmoud to discuss matters of mutual interest. I mean, news in those days was different, but to get it right, we had to learn a lot. And I think you'll find that as you go forward in your careers, that you'll do a lot of stuff in your 20s that seems like a lot of hard work to learn how to write things, or to learn how to trade things, or to learn how to sell things. But you'll find that the 10 years you spend learning your trade are invaluable to what you do next. And what I did next was quite by accident. I came to Turkey and trying to sort of refugee from the Middle East, because I thought the Middle East was pretty much a lost cause. I don't regret that decision, and it turned out I didn't realize how Turkey was going to change. Turkey was pretty miserable 25 years ago when I came. Very polluted, unhappy country. And look at it now, it's very colourful, it's going places, feels good, lots of stuff going on, and I think that it seems like it will continue that way. I think that's been good. And all through these years in Turkey, I've changed employer several times. I started off with a news agency, then I went to a British newspaper, then I went to an American newspaper, and wrote a couple of books along the way too. And I guess, as you all find, as you go up your careers, you go up the food chain, and life gets more interesting. And I had a big moment when I had to go and cover the Iraq War 10 years ago for the Wall Street Journal, the biggest American newspaper, very important newspaper. And I spent a year trying to explain to Americans why it would be a very bad idea for them to invade Iraq in those days. And it had made absolutely no difference to anything. The newspaper printed the stories, but somehow it was very difficult to explain to the Americans why it was a bad idea to do this. The Americans think that they can fix things, that they're good people, and when they take over somewhere, because they're good people, they will make that country good And Saddam Hussein, obviously, bad person. So get rid of him, put us in, and it'll all go fine. It's a very simplistic view of the world. And after that, which was about 25 years I'd been a journalist, I really found that I couldn't go on, because if on that big question, where I had had such a privileged place to tell people about what was wrong with invading Iraq, and it made no perceptible difference at all, what was the point of going on with that? So I kind of resigned from the newspaper, and then wrote a book called Dining with Al-Qaeda, which is about my 25 years in the Middle East. But the main theme of it is how writing is important in explaining things from one set of perceptions to another set of perceptions. Now, you live in Turkey, and Turkey has a certain set of perceptions, and that's not really about what I'm writing about in the book. It's about the reality in the Middle East and what Americans expect that reality to be. So we would go to a country like Iraq and write our stories and send it to our editorial desk, where it would be edited for the newspaper. And about 70-80% of what you wrote would go into the newspaper. And as a journalist, you'd be very happy to be published. Have many of you been published? Had seen your names in the papers, in the magazine? It's a great feeling. I promise you will walk on air when it happens. Okay. But so you want to be published. So you accept that 70-80% is only 70-80% of what you wrote. But when I was writing the book, I started looking at actually what was taken out, because it doesn't seem important when you're working. You just say, okay, he doesn't like that sentence, fine, take it out, take it out. But then you gradually realise that the shape of the story was leaving out uncomfortable truths, things that Americans were not really ready to read. It's not that our editors were censoring it. It's more that they were making it culturally compatible with the American worldview. And I realised that after decades and decades of reading 70% of what journalists are writing from the Middle East, and of course after you've been there a bit, you learn to write compatibly with the American worldview. And so you have what I think of as an accumulation of error. And to the point where today the American public thinks the Middle East is one thing, but the Middle East is actually something very different. And it's all a question of context. They read the news could be basically accurate, but they're seeing this news as the whole story, whereas in fact the whole story is a big thing of context. It's very similar with Turkey. You have not yet gone to your many universities in America and Canada, as I hear you're going to be doing. But when you go there, you will find that people either haven't heard of Turkey or think Turkey is a very different place from the one you know it to be. And that's because of the way it's being written about very often, or the way it's being portrayed in media like television or radio. Anyway, so 5 years ago, I was very lucky to be approached to open the office in Turkey of something called International Crisis Group, which is an organization dedicated to ending wars, helping peace processes. I see there's lots of questions about Cyprus. That's a peace process, supposedly. And it's also a frozen conflict. We also deal with hot wars, like what's going on in Syria at the moment. And what we do is we write about it. We try and explain to the world the real facts of the case in fairly long reports, 20 to 40 pages long. They can be downloaded by anybody for free on our website, crisisgroup.org, and you can see also the articles we write in newspapers there, all trying to serve the policy goals. We believe that through our research, we will get 100% of the views of people on the ground, and what's very important is that we usually are able to speak to all sides in a conflict. In the case of Cyprus, which you are so interested in, there are at least 7 sides to the conflict that you really have to speak to be before you can say with some sense of certainty that you know all the points of view of the question. And it's quite interesting as well that unusually at Crisis Group, it's one person that goes around all these people. So the person that ends up writing the report has had to talk with and explain his ideas to each of the sides in a conflict. And that forces that person to adjust his language so that everyone is on the same page. And that's what I think we also contribute, a new language in most conflicts. And in the sense that what we say is pretty much neutral. Pretty much. It's not completely. Obviously, there is no real neutrality, but we try hard. And how is it that we get anybody to pay for this, right? I mean, I was saying over lunch, the big problem about being a writer is getting paid. And what is interesting about our group is we're about 150 people. We're 50 different nationalities. Okay, most of them educated in liberal Western arts universities, obviously, but from all over the world. 50 mother languages amongst us. And I think that we're probably transatlantic, okay? Europe and America is dominant, and you can see that in our financing as well. We're about $20 million budget. Half of that comes from European governments, 22 European governments. So we're not bound to any particular government. And the other half comes from North America, and there, because of the different attitudes to giving money, there it's mostly private individuals and foundations giving us money to produce these fact reports that not only produce this language that is what we think is the golden mean to show people the way that they share more in common than they think they do, but also because of the policy prescriptions. We say how we think conflicts can be solved and what the various sides should do. And what is weird about working with governments, and we very often are speaking with governments directly, is that most governments are not idealistic in the slightest. They are actually quite, the people in them, the people that work for governments are obviously a bit like you and me. I mean, perhaps 10% of you will end up working in the government. Who knows? And you won't be that different from the other people in the class. But so the people in the government could be idealistic. The government's actions itself are actually very materialistic. They're looking out for their own interest. It could be a strategic interest, or it could be a financial interest. To give just one example, I met someone on Cyprus, to keep the topic focused. And Cyprus is a tiny island, okay? There's no one there practically, about as big as, about the same number of people as there are in here and the next door few villages. Okay? So 1.1 million total, both the Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriots are. But the Greek Cypriots are only 800,000, and actually Greek Cypriots is probably only 600,000. Okay? So the Greek Cypriot president gets an invitation to go to Paris and London. He arrives, this is 13 years ago, and I have the story from the person who was with the president on his visit. They arrive at the Elysee, they're invited in by President Chirac, and before they even sat down, and you've got to remember, this is tiny Cyprus getting its moment to put its burning issue, which is of course for the Cypriots is, oh my God, we've got 30,000 Turkish troops on our island, please help us get them off. Okay? That's if you're the Greek Cypriot, that's what you think. But the first thing that Chirac asks him, even before he sat down, is, Cyprus Airlines, right? Yeah, you're buying some new planes, aren't you? They are going to be Airbus, aren't they? Okay. So before he's even had a chance to say, please help us get the Turkish troops off the island, he's already dealing with the offer. You know, are you going to be my friend, or are you going to buy my planes? Okay, that's in France. It goes over the channel to London, where Tony Blair is still in power. And Tony Blair lets them sit down first. And then he says, Cyprus. Yeah, Cyprus. That's Cyprus Airlines. Yeah, you've got to tender out for some aeroplanes, haven't you? They are going to be Rolls-Royce engines, aren't they? Okay. So you have a situation where governments are always, have got something in their minds. And it colours everything that they do when it comes to their conflict. Okay? And so actually, governments are very happy to see us work on and describe policies to end conflicts. Okay. They know we're not perfect, they know that we're doing this with very few people, but we have these two key ingredients. One, that we go to all the parties, so we have a pretty good 360-degree view of the problem, and secondly, that we are really independent with the transatlantic bias, okay? Yeah, the liberal arts bias, okay? That it's not, it's a predictable bias. One government once said to us when we were asking it for money, is the guy listened to our fundraiser and then asked him, so let me get this straight, you're actually asking me, the big government of Britain, to give you a stick made of gold that you can then use to beat me with, right? And that's true, that's what it is. That's what we try to do. We try to be the kind of good conscience of all governments and to explain them how they can make the world a better place. It's a very dangerous thing to try and do, because when you are working for an NGO, which on my business card it says, working to end conflict worldwide, right? You feel a bit strange, especially if you were a journalist for 25 years, and journalists are quite cynical people, and you do not believe that you are working to end conflict worldwide, which I hope all of you are at your age. No one put their hands up at the table, but I hope you are, because it's a precious thing that you should keep and not lose sight of, because otherwise what is there to work for? But it's a funny thing. It can work. The language can stick. You sometimes see a government policy changing, and also sometimes I see it in our donors. You know, when you're talking to them, you suddenly realise that someone's giving you, for instance, we have free services from some donors, and when I started working for them, with my business card saying working to end conflict worldwide, I was a bit sort of I used to smile a bit when I gave my business card, but something happened when I was in a long meeting with a legal advisor who was giving us legal advice for free, and I didn't understand NGOs at that point. And I said, look, you do understand, we have no money to pay you, right? And this very high-powered lawyer who probably charged $500 an hour normally said, no, I know, we're giving you this money, this time for free. And by the way, this is going to be my best hour this week, because for this hour, I feel like I'm helping you change the world, but for the rest of the week, I'm only helping shave 0.01% of tax costs of a cola bottling company. You know, it's this has made my week seem a bit more worth it. Of course, it is kind of worth it when you're taking home $10,000 a week as well. So that's what we do. It's a bit idealistic, and the danger is that you end up saying, well, everyone should hold hands and smile and get along. You have to be a bit more hard-headed than that, but ultimately, I don't think it's a bad goal. And you know, when it comes to your questions, you know, normally this is what when I answer them, that's what we'll be trying to aim for. We're trying to aim to people to see. Usually in a conflict, it's got to a stage where everyone's comfortable and living with it, and you know, Cyprus is like that. And I will try and answer. I'll actually go through your questions since you've gone to the trouble to. You wanted to read them out aloud, I understood. Yeah. Okay, so we've got Ilhan, right, to start.